You're listening to the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a special episode of the Dibbly Dobbly podcast. And on today's episode of the podcast, it's a episode that's going to be based on looking back on the podcast and our journey, because recently we have ticked over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. I thought it would be a great opportunity in this special episode to really talk about our journey, reflect on the journey. I think it's important to reflect on the journey you've been on, especially when you cross milestones like this. Is to reflect on the journey that we've had thus far on the podcast. And it's been an interesting journey, full of discovery, full of learnings. I've met some great people along the way, built friendships, bonds, especially with the people I've interviewed, but also the people I've come to know from the community as well that we've built up over the last 3 years or so of the podcast. And I would like to talk about that in this episode today. My initial reactions and thoughts from us crossing 1,000 subscribers is, well, a wide range of emotions, really. I'm satisfied, I'm happy, I'm content, I'm relieved, I'm grateful, feel slightly embarrassed in some way. Also probably saying to myself, I don't really deserve this. As I said, it's a wide range of emotions, which I'll go into in this episode. And then you start to understand why I feel these emotions and the way I do. But nonetheless, it is a proud moment for us. 3 years of hard work and perseverance and commitment has paid off. And I never thought in a million years that we'll ever reach 1,000 subscribers when I first started in 2020. When the podcast was born, basically on the 22nd of December, 2020, 3 years ago, now going into the fourth year this year in 2024, I never thought that the podcast would ever reach this milestone. I was happy when we reached 100 subscribers and then 200, 300, then 400, and 500, 600, 700, 800, then 900. I was like, that's pretty cool. I'm happy with that. And then we finally broke 1,000 recently. So I'm very, very surprised and grateful that we managed to tick over this this landmark and this milestone. And we have an opportunity to reflect on the journey that we've been on. As I said, I have no words to describe this moment. I'm just trying to think about words to talk about in this episode. It's very hard to do, but I'll try my best. So the podcast basically is a way to, mainly just to promote cricket, talk about cricket, mainly focusing on Australian cricket because I'm from Australia and that's the team I support. So the podcast was mainly focusing on that, but also international cricket as well. And then all aspects of cricket, from the history of cricket to other things within cricket as well. So that's basically the core principle of the podcast. And that's just basically what the podcast is all about. Looking back to the early episodes that we did to now, it's been a big change. It's been a big difference. The podcast has evolved over the last 3 years. To be honest, when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. So if you were a part of the early subscribers that subscribed in the early years, and you're still with us, you would understand what I meant by that, is that the episodes themselves have changed. I've got more confidence over the last 3 years doing it. I still get nervous every time I post an episode. That's just the way I am. Whether or not it will turn out the way I hoped it would. Yeah, it's just it's quite interesting to look back on that and see that change and progression over the last 3 years. It's just been an incredible journey. The people I've met, the people I've interviewed, the people I've talked to within the community that we've built up has been fantastic, and forever grateful and much appreciated that support and encouragement from everyone. So in this episode, as I mentioned at the start, it's about reflecting, looking back, and also acknowledging and thanking the people who have really made a difference to the podcast and really helped us on our journey as well. So it's an opportunity to thank those people as well in this episode today. But before we do that, I thought I will share a bit of a story time, if I can say that, on how the podcast was actually born. It's quite an interesting story, looking back on it, how the podcast became to be, actually, how the Dibbly Dobbly podcast was born. How did it come about? So we have to go back to 2017, which is 7 years ago now. This is 3 years before the podcast actually started in 2020. So back in 2017, I had a Facebook page which was dedicated to cricket. And that wasn't really a podcast type page or anything like that. It was more of a Facebook page that was mainly about covering the breaking news and all the news that happened in world cricket, but mainly focusing on Australian cricket at the time. So I did that for a couple of years, from 2017 to 2019. It was very successful. We had 1,000 likes on the Facebook page, and I was pretty happy with how it turned out at the time. But then in 2019, it got taken down on Facebook for reasons that the name that I used on the Facebook page was sort of impersonating Cricket Australia at that stage or something like that, whatever. So anyway, it got taken down because of that reason. So I was pretty disappointed when that happened. And then after that, I sort of toiled with the idea of creating a podcast of some sort. So I had a good long chat with my very good friend about this. And, you know, we chatted about it, and we basically discussed an idea of a podcast, and you could do a podcast of some sort. So I got to work brainstorming ideas of names, also how the show would look and the structure and what type of episodes we'll do, also the logo, and all that stuff. So I did that brainstorming. I toyed with the idea of doing it. I, had a few months to think about it, and, sort of said, well, will it work? Will it won't work or anything like that? So anyway, that's how it became to be the podcast. And a few months elapsed, and the idea of the podcast started to grow and grow as we got towards the end of 2020. So in December of 2020, I decided to just go and take a bit of a risk and say, right, okay, we're going to do the podcast. We're going to call it the Dibbly Dobbly podcast, and this is going to be the logo, and this is what we're going to do. And on the 22nd of December, 2020, the YouTube channel was born, and the podcast was born as well. And that's how it all started. That's how the podcast became to be. And I think it was a bit of a sliding doors moment, if I have to say. We have that in life, where you have sliding door moments where things just happen for a reason, and then something else happens which turns out to be a positive. So losing the Facebook page the way I did was a bit of a negative, but from that became a positive outcome, and that was the podcast. So I think, looking back, without that being taken down, the Facebook page, that is, the podcast would not have been created or born or be what it is today if it wasn't for that moment. So I always look back on that and say, you know what, it's probably the best decision I've made. And here we are, 3 years later. Here we are, and that's how it became to be. And I remember that first few episodes. Looking back recently, on the first few episodes we did, the first 4 episodes of the podcast were about India's tour to Australia, because it was in 2020, 2021 that India won here in Australia against Australia, which involved them getting bowled out for 36 in Adelaide. That was the first episode that we posted on the podcast, which was titled India All Out for 36. Where did it go wrong? That was the first episode we posted. And then obviously in that series, India won at the Gabba, and that episode that we did on that historical win by India at the Gabba was titled India Win the Series 2-1 and End Australia's Dominance at the Gabba. And that episode pretty much took off, really. And that was the catalyst for us to really get going in terms of the YouTube aspect. And that video has now got over 9,500 views, nearly 10,000 views. And it was posted 3 years ago, which is just crazy. And at the time, I thought, wow, it's pretty crazy, for that video in our 4th episode ever, for that to really take off the way it did was just mind-blowing for me, and it was just surreal. And then we continued on from that moment on, and the episodes we've done since, we've covered all aspects of cricket, as I mentioned, from Australian cricket to international cricket to the history of the game to associate cricket to other things involved in cricket. We've covered on the podcast, and it's been incredible to look back on that. What people don't realize is that whenever you do a podcast of some sort, it doesn't have to be on cricket or other podcasts that people do, is the hard work and the effort that you have to put into, first of all, doing a podcast, but also on YouTube as well. YouTube can be a very unforgiving platform. We know the algorithms and all that stuff are very difficult to try and overcome, because at the end of the day, they're not meant to be overcome. It's meant to be a challenge. And it's been like that over the last 3 years. So the hard work that I put in, I think what people don't realize is that, yes, you see the episodes that get posted and you see me interviewing people or doing an episode, but you don't know the hard work that goes into it. I've been doing it for 3 years now. I've sort of gotten used to it, but it still feels the same as when I first started in 2020, is that you got to do the editing. You got to plan an episode. You got to think about what you're going to do for an episode. You got to think about who you're going to interview. Then you got to do the interview. That takes time. Then you got to plan that and all that stuff and prepare for it. So it does take a lot out of you. And trying to balance that with your everyday life as well is very difficult as well. And that's the challenge that you have, especially when you do it by yourself like me. And I will be honest, there have been some days where you just feel like not doing this anymore. You feel like, is it really going to get anywhere? Are people really going to be bothered listening? Is it worth the time or the effort or the resources that you put into it? So I've had those days all the time when doing the podcast. But the one thing that has kept me going is obviously my passion and love for cricket, of course, but also just wanting to express the game of cricket and to promote it and to encourage people to, take up the sport if they're newcomers to the sport. We've had many people who've commented on some of our videos, people from America, for example, saying, I like your channel because it's helping me understand and learn the game of cricket. And that's what keeps me going. And also the support of the community as well. And knowing that what we're doing is making people happy and putting a smile on their face in these tough times, which is fantastic. So that's kept me going. But I've had those days where you just feel like, is it worth it, or you want to pack it in or whatever. So the hard work that goes into it, it's very demanding. It's very hard. It's as I said, it's doing a podcast of this nature does take a lot out of you mentally and physically as well. But we've gotten through it. We've gotten through those down periods and low days, but we've always managed to pick ourselves up and go again. So that's what we've done over the last 3 years of the podcast, and it's been great fun. It's been great fun. It's been tremendous fun. I couldn't have asked for this journey. It's been a memorable journey. It's been a journey of discovery. It's been a journey of meeting new people from all parts of the world, whether it be interviewing people on the podcast or interacting with our community as well, who are from all parts of the world, the creating world, that is. It's fantastic. So basically that's the reflection bit done, if you have to say that in this episode. And now we move on to personally thanking the people who have made the Dibbly Dobbly podcast the way it is. Without these people who have helped us, supported us over the last 3 years, we would not have the podcasts that we have today. And these people are very supportive of the podcast, have helped out immensely. And I thought it's a great opportunity to thank these people personally in this episode, to show my appreciation and gratitude of their support. So the first person I'd like to thank personally is my sort of helper on the podcast. You don't really see this person. He's behind the scenes. He's sort of like the invisible man. You don't really see him. He doesn't really appear in any episodes. He's sort of doing things behind the scenes. A lot of people would think it's just me doing the podcast. In a way, it sort of is, because I'm mainly doing everything, like speaking about cricket and all that stuff. But the person who helps me doesn't know a lot about cricket at all. But what he does do is help us in many different ways that you may not know. First of all, he was the person that created the logo of the podcast, which you can see on my hat that I'm wearing if you're watching on YouTube. He's the one that created the logo of the podcast. He's the one that does the thumbnails on the videos. And, to be honest, I'm not really a wizard when it comes to the Photoshop, but he certainly does a better job than me. So he's the one who creates all our graphics, the logo of the podcast he's created, the thumbnails. He gives up his time to do that and to help me out. We've been very good friends for many years. We've known each other for, I think, 20 plus years. We've been to school together. We're very good friends and mates, as we say in Australia. So obviously he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name in this episode. But to Chris, thank you. Thank you for the help and the guidance and the, just helping me in terms of the podcast, and that support and the encouragement. Where things got tough, you always said, let's just stick at it and see where it goes. And without you, we wouldn't have the graphics or the logo or the thumbnails that we do. So I really appreciate you doing all that. And obviously, if you're listening, which I know you would be, because you listen to all the episodes we do, thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you for the support and the guidance. It's much appreciated on that front. And for many people listening, he's behind the scenes. You don't really see him, but there is another person helping us on the podcast in some shape or form. So to Chris, thank you for your support and what you do for the podcast. There's some other people I'd like to thank as well. And these two people have been very instrumental in terms of how the podcast has really been exposed and people have gotten to experience what we do here. And I'm very good friends with them. We've developed a friendship over the game of cricket. And these people were our first ever guests on the podcast. These are the first two people that I ever interviewed on the podcast. And we had a chat with them back in 2021. And I'm talking about Nick and Gabe from Cricket for Americans. And many of our subscribers have subscribed and followed, Nick and Gabe over their time in the game of cricket on their channel, but they've also subscribed to our channel as well. So basically, for those who don't know, Nick and Gabe are a couple of Americans who decided to do a YouTube channel called Cricket for Americans, which was looking at the game of cricket, learning about the game of cricket from an American's perspective. And I've been on their channel many times before, which was great fun. And they've been on our channel as well, talking about cricket. And back in 2021, that was sort of the time when I discovered their channel. I decided to get in touch with them and to ask them to come on for our interview, for an interview on the podcast, I should say, about their channels and, about getting into cricket, because I thought at the time it's quite interesting. A couple of Americans learning about cricket. It's quite interesting. So I sent an email to Nick at the time. I remember it so well. He quickly came back and said, yeah, we'll be happy to come on, me and Gabe. So we did the interview, which was in 2021. I think it was back in August. July, actually. July. Back in July of 2021. And that was a great interview. I remember it so well. I was very nervous because it was the first interview that we ever done on the podcast. But Nick and Gabe were great. They were fantastic. They're good people. And from there, from that moment, developed a good friendship that we've had over the last 3 or so years. They've been our two biggest supporters of the podcast. They've really believed in us, and they've shown that support by coming onto the podcast, and also for me to go on their channel as well, to give me an opportunity to go on their channel, to go on their live streams, which I enjoyed immensely. It was great fun. It was my way of trying to help them out and trying to just help them out in a way and give back after all the support they've given me. Going on their channel was great fun, but it also allowed us to get new people across to the podcast, to get us out there, basically. And Nick and Gabe, Cricket for Americans, have over 18,000 subscribers. They have a big audience compared to us. We only have 1,000. But for them to allow me to do that and to go on there, basically just to get recognized, really. And the video that we posted when Nick and Gabe came onto the podcast for that interview back in 2021, that's got over 3,000 views. And mainly, most of the subscribers we've gained have come from that video 3 years ago. And it was from the Cricket for Americans audience. So that was overwhelming at the time to see that really take off and see the subs really climbing and people liking what we've been doing. But yeah, Nick and Gabe are two great people. They, as I said, they've been our biggest supporters. They've always backed us. They've supported us. They've always said to me, you're doing some good things. The channel's great. You love cricket. People will, gravitate towards that. And one day you'll get over 1,000 subscribers in the near future. And, here we are, and it's happened. So I don't think, without Nick and Gabe's input, without their support, I don't think we would have the support that we have garnered on the podcast thus far. And, to have two people like that, to really say that we believe in you, and you know what you're doing. And people will soon subscribe and support you is fantastic, and to hear that from them is fantastic, and it's just unreal. So to Nick and Gabe, I'm sure they're listening. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the friendship as well. Thank you for the support you've shown me, and also the support I've shown you as well, to Cricket for Americans as well. It's been very much appreciated. It's I have no words to describe it any further. I'm just so grateful for the support, and I was so grateful and helpful to try and help you guys as well, and support you guys on Cricket for Americans, and for you to acknowledge me in the video that you posted about the channel's future on Cricket for Americans, because for those who don't know, Nick and Gabe have taken a bit of a hiatus from the channel for a bit. But for them to acknowledge me in that video and to thank me personally is quite overwhelming, quite embarrassing in a little bit, in some way, but also pretty proud of making a difference and helping people out. So I felt very touched by that kind gesture by Nick and Gabe, and it's the least I can do after the support they've shown me over the last 3 or so years that we've known each other. And that's what the game of cricket can do, really. It can connect people from all parts of the world, can it? It's a universal language as well. So to Nick and Gabe, thank you so much. And I know you're listening, because you always listen to the episodes whenever you can. I just want to say thank you so much for the support. It's really changed the way the podcast has been noticed, and people have gotten across us, really. So thank you. I couldn't thank you enough. And also for those who may be listening, go and check out Nick and Gabe. Go and subscribe to Cricket for Americans. Go and subscribe to Boring Reviews and The Final Reaction, which are their other YouTube channels, which mainly focus on reaction type videos on movies, sports, music, etc. You name it, anything. Go and subscribe to those channels and really support Nick and Gabe and what they do there. So we'll leave links to those in the description of this episode, and also the link to the interview that I did with Nick and Gabe as well back in 2021. So to Nick and Gabe, thank you for your support. Last but not least, I want to thank, hang on. Let me try and reword that. The other people I want to thank as well is the people who have agreed to come on to the podcast for an interview. I've been so lucky and blessed and grateful that many people have agreed to come on for an interview on the podcast. I couldn't imagine the people that we've interviewed on the podcast, from former international umpires to international players to authors to historians to people who work within the game of cricket, people who are just ordinary fans who love cricket, to come onto the podcast for a chat. That's probably one of the favorite things about the podcast for me. I always look forward to the interviews, because it's always great to have a chat with other people within cricket and what they're doing. And, it's great to have those moments with those people, chatting on the camera, of course, but also off the camera. So a lot of the moments and the memories that I will have is not only the chat on the camera with the person in question, but also the chat that we have off the camera as well. I remember those moments quite fondly. But yeah, interviewing people the way we have, for those to give up their time to come and speak to me, is pretty grateful. They could have said no. They could have said no and gone somewhere else, or just give it no thought at all, just because we're not a famous podcast in the cricketing world or anything like that. But they have said, yes, we'll be happy to come on and talk about the game of cricket, talk about what we do within the game. So to those people, we've interviewed so many, there's too many to list. I I would like to thank them for, giving up their time to come and speak to us about what they do in cricket. And it's, much appreciated. And those people know who they are. They may be listening, they may not be listening, but once again, thank you to those people who, given up their time to have come and chat with me about what they do in the game of cricket. I always look forward to the interviews that we do on the podcast. It's one of my favorite things about the podcast. Last but not least, the people that I would like to thank here is all of you, the listeners, the people who watch our videos on YouTube, the people who follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, who like our Facebook page, the community. I want to thank you. Without the community, we would not have the supporter base that we have garnered without the community. I think the Dibbly Dobbly podcast community is quite a unique community. We have a wide range of people from all different countries in the cricketing world who all love one thing, and that's the game of cricket. Thank you for the kind words and messages of support and encouragement and compliments. They're much appreciated. And without you, we will not have a community the way we have developed over the last 3 years. And for those who are listening, do mention in the comments, what you like about the podcast, what made you subscribe to the podcast, what made you want to listen to me drabble on about cricket. What do you like about the podcast? Were you here at the start when we started in 2020? When did you subscribe to the podcast? So if you're listening to this on YouTube, in the comments section, comment down below all those things I just mentioned. What do you like about the podcast? What made you want to listen to me drabble on about cricket? When did you subscribe? Did you subscribe in 2020? Were you here at the start? Are you one of the original OG subscribers from the very beginning? Tell us when you joined us. We would love to hear all those comments in the comment section. I will be very interested to read all those comments there. But, the people really make the podcast, the community. And without you guys, we would not have a Dibbly Dobbly podcast. We would not have the community that we have and the support. So thank you to all of you, to our listeners, to our watchers. Thank you so much. The support is much appreciated. And it's something I don't take for granted. To reach 1,000 subscribers, to know that 1,000 people from different parts of the world like what you're doing, is a very overwhelming thing. But it's also one thing that I don't take for granted is that support, and thank you for that. Well, I think that's covered everything in this episode, this special episode of the podcast today. I think if you're listening to this episode, you will have a bit of an idea of how the podcast was created. How was it born? Few of my reflections back on the journey. Also the people who have helped us along the way. And if I had to choose a couple of things that I'm proud of the podcast, there are many things I'm proud of with the podcast. Number one, the podcast itself. But there are some other things that I'm proud of as well with the podcast. And one of those is, some of the episodes that we've done on the podcast that have really brought awareness or have really helped, people understand more about the game and understand more about other things as well. So if I have to look back and say, what are you most proud of the most? If someone had to ask me that question, I think what I'm proud of the most is the episodes we did on mental health and well-being. When we chatted to Mark Boynes from Opening Up, who does wonderful work in the UK, going around cricket clubs, talking about mental health and well-being to young players and to players of all different ages in the game of cricket. That episode we did with him, and also the episode we did on mental health with my cricket coach a couple of years ago now. I think those 2 episodes are the episodes that I'm most proud of, covering a topic that does affect a lot of people within the game of cricket. Cricket's one of those sports where mental health is quite a very big issue. Because obviously cricket's a very tough sport. It's a very mental game, and especially international players going through that as well. But also players of all levels that play the game go through that as well. So that's the one thing I'm most proud of, doing those episodes. And I look back and say, I'm glad I've done those episodes, and I'm happy that a lot of people have said, those episodes have really helped me deal with my own battles with mental health, and that's makes it worthwhile. So I'm really proud of that. Another thing that I'm proud of is the Associate Cricket Series that we've started. We started that in December of last year, mainly covering associate cricket, because really associate cricket doesn't really get covered as much by people in the mainstream cricket media and all that stuff, because people just say it's associate cricket, the standard's not really good and all that stuff. That can be further from the truth. To the people I've interviewed in this Associate Cricket Series episode, from people behind the scenes working in these organizations in terms of cricket associations or federations in these countries, to the players as well. They're doing a lot of great work. And I wanted to understand their stories and understand what they're doing in terms of promoting associate cricket and doing what they can to have a meaningful impact in their community and also in their country. And there's a lot of passionate people behind the scenes in associate cricket. And it's probably the best decision I've made on the podcast to do an Associate Cricket Series episode. And a lot of the people I've interviewed have said, thank you for giving us the platform to speak about our country and to get it out there, really, the story of what we're doing. And that's really, a proud moment for me to look back on that and say, no, I'm making a difference in the cricketing world. And that's by sharing these people's stories and getting associate cricket out there and knowing that cricket, it's not about the full members of the ICC. Cricket's more than that. It's the other countries around the world that play cricket. And by doing the series, we've really helped to get their stories out. And they've been very receptive. They've been very grateful for the opportunity. And that makes me proud the most, really, looking back on that. And we still have more episodes on the Associate Cricket Series as well. More episodes will be coming out in the near future on that series. But that's another thing that I'm proud of. What's another thing that I'm proud of? I already mentioned it, the community that we've built up as well. I'm proud of that. And the support. You look back on that and you say, wow, that our podcast has really done that. So I'm really proud of that as well. And looking back on the journey, it's been an incredible journey. But thank you everyone who has supported us on this journey. Do mention in the comments about the podcast, what you like about it. When did you subscribe? Were you an OG subscriber at the start when we first started in the formative years? So tell us about your story about the podcast and how you came across us and what makes you want to listen to me drabble on about cricket. So we would love to hear that in the comments from our community. In terms of where to next, I'm pretty happy. Look, people will say, oh, you should aim for 10,000 subscribers or whatever. But yeah, that could be possible. But I'm pretty happy, really. I'm happy, I'm content. I'm proud of what we've achieved. Any subscribers beyond 1,000 or more, I will be happy with. I couldn't care less if we get to 10,000. It would be great, but I couldn't care because I'm already grateful for what I have right now. 1,000 subscribers, I couldn't imagine when I started this journey. That was the ultimate goal, and I never thought it would be achievable, but we have achieved it, and we have worked, if I can say, bloody hard over the last 3 years. Certainly me, I've worked bloody hard to get to this point. So I'm just grateful for anything that comes my way after this. But I know people will mention that, you should get to 10,000 or something like that. So, but I'm just grateful for everything at the moment. So yeah, I think that's a good note to end on. Once again, thank you everyone to the people that have helped us. You've already been mentioned in this episode. And thank you everyone for subscribing to the podcast, for showing the support, liking what we're doing. And hopefully we can continue to grow and develop as the years progress on the Dibbly Dobbly podcasts. We're entering the 4th year of the podcast, and hopefully 2024 can be a very prosperous year for us, as it was in the previous years up until this year. But once again, thank you everyone for listening to this episode today, this special episode, as we look back on our journey, as we cross 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much for all the support. I really appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words, the messages that I always get from people in our community. Thank you. And hopefully we put a smile on your face as well, talking about the game of cricket. So thank you. Until next time, keep safe and bye for now.